Welcome, mystic seekers, to Mystic Manor, where history meets mystery. From the shadows of history, a figure emerges, a creature of the night that has haunted humanity for centuries. But what truly lies behind the legend of vampires? The origins of vampire mythology are steeped in centuries of folklore, history, and superstition from various cultures around the world. The vampire, as we commonly imagine it today, a human-feeding, undead creature, has evolved through a complex web of myth, fears, disease, and religious beliefs. From the chilling tales of ancient civilizations to the modern interpretations we see in films and literature, vampires have evolved but remain rooted in a web of fear and fascination. Let's uncover the truths that inspired these chilling legends, exploring the fears and cultural anxieties that gave rise to these haunting figures, and unravel the threads of myth and reality and sink our teeth into the dark origins of vampires. Some of the earliest examples of vampire-like creatures can be traced back to ancient Mesopotamian religion and culture. In Sumerian religion, there were spirits known to have escaped the underworld, either by their own power or through summoning by priests or magical rituals. These spirits were often considered restless or malevolent, as they were no longer confined to the underworld, where the dead were supposed to reside. The underworld in Sumerian belief was a dark and dreary place where souls went after death. Once there, the dead were not supposed to return to the realm of the living unless specific rituals or powerful magic brought them back. The spirits that managed to escape the underworld were typically considered dangerous to the living. These escaped spirits could take many forms, including Ekimmu and Utukku, which were believed to possess or consume the living. These beings were thought to be created when someone passed away tragically or without proper burial, leaving them doomed to wander and torment the living. Ekimmu means that which is snatched away. Their connection to the concept of vampirism comes from this idea of being snatched away from life and then returning to haunt and feed off the life force of the living, much like the later concept of vampires. In ancient Mesopotamian lore, the Utukku were restless spirits, often created when someone died under troubling circumstances, such as an unfulfilled obligation or unexpectedly. These spirits were believed to haunt desolate places like deserts, mountains, or along the ocean shore. The Ekimmu and Utukku were often seen as out of place in the world of the living and could wreak havoc by spreading illness, misfortune, and great loss. Over time, these malevolent spirits became closely associated with demons, and their presence was deeply feared among the living. From the haunting spirits of Mesopotamia, we now encounter a world where seductive entities and bloodthirsty creatures lurk in the shadows. These dark tales emerged from ancient lore, blurring the lines between life and mortality. In the shadows of ancient Greek mythology, we encounter a duo of fearsome entities, the Empousai and Lamiae. These entities were notorious for their ability to shape-shift into the forms of stunningly beautiful women, luring young men with seduction and charm. Yet, behind this alluring facade lay a far darker reality. They were demonic beings with a terrifying hunger for flesh and blood. The Empusa was particularly striking, described as having one leg of brass and the other of a donkey, her hair ablaze with flames. A loyal companion of the goddess Hecate, she was said to emerge from the depths of the underworld, preying on unwary travelers and the vulnerable. On the other hand, the Lamia was a complex figure. Often depicted with a serpent's tail instead of legs, she was initially a child-stealing demon. Over time, her myth evolved, and she became known for her seductive prowess, using illusion to enchant and entrap young men. Reflecting the classic vampire's allure and deadly intent, Lamia, with her mystery, embodies the archetype of the femme fatale, drawing in young men before revealing her true, monstrous form. In many ways, these mythological figures laid the groundwork for later vampire legends. Their ability to charm and enchant while harboring a dark, consuming hunger parallels the way vampires seduce their victims, blending beauty with horror. As we move from the mythic landscapes of ancient Greece, a new chapter unfolds in the dark saga of vampires. In this period, the chilling fear of the undead began to take root, influenced by cultural anxieties and historical events that would reshape our understanding of these creatures to what it is today. The modern vampire myth we recognize today began to take form in Eastern Europe during the Middle Ages, largely influenced by superstition, fears, and Christian theology about the soul and afterlife. The word vampire has a fascinating etymology that reflects a rich tapestry of cultural influences. It is believed to have originated from the Slavic word upir around the 11th century, which described creatures found in Eastern European folklore. This term transitioned into Old French as vampire in the 18th century, gaining popularity as tales of the undead spread through Europe. Additionally, some scholars trace connections to Latin and Greek, with the Latin vampirus and the Greek vampiros echoing similar themes of the undead. Slavic cultures, especially in regions of Serbia and Bulgaria, were rife with tales of upirs or vampires, dead people who returned from the grave to feed on the living. These creatures were often blamed for unexplained deaths, plagues, or natural disasters. In many Slavic regions, vampires were seen as bloated, ruddy-faced corpses rather than pale, elegant figures. These vampires would rise from their graves, usually at night, and drain life from their victims by feeding on them. The Slavic belief was that improper burial rites and brutal endings could lead to a person returning as a vampire. These beliefs resulted in people exhuming corpses and performing rituals like staking or burning the deceased to ensure they would not rise again. One of the most infamous figures linked to vampire lore is Vlad III Dracula, also known as Vlad the Impaler, the 15th century ruler of Wallachia. The name Dracula has intriguing roots that connect it to both history and myth. Vlad III inherited the surname Dracula from his father, Vlad II, who was given the title Dracul for being a member of the Order of the Dragon. This order was established in 1408 to defend Christianity in Eastern Europe against the Ottoman Empire. In Romanian, Dracul translates to the dragon, which symbolizes strength and power. However, Dracul can also mean the devil, reflecting the duality of the name and its ties to the supernatural. Vlad Dracula is often cited as a historical inspiration for the modern vampire myth due to his notorious reputation for cruelty and the brutal methods he employed during his reign in the 15th century. The link between Vlad Dracula and vampirism was solidified in popular culture through Bram Stoker's novel. While Stoker's character is not a direct representation of Vlad, the name Dracula and the characterization of a bloodthirsty nobleman with a dark past drew heavily on the historical figure's reputation, cementing the association between Vlad and the vampire legend in the minds of readers and audiences. Through these various aspects, Vlad III's life and reputation created a powerful foundation for the vampire mythos, making him a central figure in the historical context of vampirism. During Europe's outbreaks of the plague, people often attributed mass casualties to supernatural causes. People believed the dead were returning as vampires to feast on the living. In New England, a similar phenomenon occurred during tuberculosis outbreaks in the 18th and 19th centuries. Desperate families, trying to explain why their loved ones continued dying, would exhume bodies to perform anti-vampire rituals, such as burning hearts. A significant vampire panic swept across Eastern Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries, fueled by superstition, disease, and religious fear. In regions like Prussia, Hungary, and the Balkans, Communities were so terrified of vampires that large-scale exhumations of suspected vampires were performed. One of the earliest recorded accounts of a vampire attack comes from the case of Petar Blagojevich, a Serbian peasant who was said to have returned from the dead to drain the essence of 9 villagers. His body was exhumed, and when it was found not decomposed, he was staked through the heart and burned. Another infamous case is that of Arnold Paule, a Serbian soldier who claimed to have been attacked by a vampire during his lifetime. After his death, several villagers reported that Paole had returned to drain their life force. His body was exhumed and found to be unnaturally preserved, leading to another exhumation and staking. These vampire panics spread westward into parts of Western Europe, including France, England, and Germany. Though much of the hysteria remained localized to Eastern Europe, reports of vampires began filtering into Western European consciousness through travel writings and legal reports. The vampire myth entered popular culture through literature, where it was given new dimensions and characteristics. The Vampire, a short story by Polidori, published as a product of the same literary contest that produced Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, is considered the first vampire story in English literature. Polidori's vampire, Lord Ruthven, was an aristocratic, predatory figure, setting the stage for the modern image of the vampire. Perhaps the most famous vampire in modern culture, Count Dracula, became the archetype for modern vampire tales. Stoker's novel combined Eastern European folklore, historical elements, such as Vlad the Impaler, and Gothic horror to create the iconic vampire that would dominate pop culture. Dracula is depicted as an undead nobleman from Transylvania who drinks the blood of his victims to stay alive. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the vampire continued to evolve, moving from folklore into mainstream culture. The 1922 silent film Nosferatu, an adaptation of Stoker's Dracula, portrayed the vampire as a rat-like, terrifying figure, while later portrayals, such as Bela Lugosi's Dracula in 1931, established the suave, charming vampire. In literature and media, vampires were increasingly depicted as tragic or romantic figures, struggling with their immortality. Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles in 1976 cemented this portrayal, with characters like Lestat being simultaneously seductive, violent, and conflicted. Modern vampire stories, such as Twilight, True Blood, and The Vampire Diaries, reflect a shift toward exploring vampires as complex beings with emotional depth, relationships, and moral struggles. Vampires are still feared, but are often seen as symbols of eternal youth, beauty, and the battle between good and evil. Vampires, immortal and untouched by the passing of time, are often portrayed as ageless beings who have witnessed centuries unfold. Their bodies remain forever youthful, defying the natural order as the world around them decays. With each passing era, they gather knowledge, power, and experience, existing in a state of eternal twilight. This immortality, however, comes with a heavy price. Isolated from the world of the living, they walk a lonely path, watching loved ones grow old and die, cursed to forever linger in the shadows while time marches on without them. The vampire myth weaves together threads of history, cultural dread, disease, and the darkest corners of folklore from across the globe. What once lurked in the shadows of Eastern European villages has since morphed into a seductive symbol of immortality, desire, and moral complexity. Yet beneath the allure, the vampire remains a mirror to our deepest fear, the inevitability of death and the mysteries that lie beyond. But perhaps the most chilling question still lingers. Do these creatures, born from our ancient fears, represent more than just legends? After all, the night is dark and full of secrets. Thank you for joining me for this story. Until next time, stay mystical.